Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Pelikan. I'm a fractional CISO, and I focus in the healthcare and fintech space. My table focused on everyone's favorite topic, risk management and risk management strategies with the subtopics of generative AI and the recent SEC ruling last year. So our chief complaint was around legal, no offense. I know we just talked about that, but that's where we started. But anyway, in all seriousness, right, when it comes to generative AI, the main topics that we thought about is, first, where do you start? You have to have an acceptable use policy, right? I've seen in many places. Okay, all right, good. I got some response. This is making me happy. Because I'll tell you, I was at another conference on Friday, and this very question came up. Who has an acceptable use policy? There was like 300 people in the room, and 10 people raised their hands. I'm like, not so good. All right, well, that's probably where we should start, is having that policy. Secondly, with that policy, establishing training and education. I know with all that we do, that's such an important thing to take into account, right? It's basic, but it needs to be done. I've seen some really strange stuff, especially in healthcare, where you've got healthcare workers putting social security numbers into the open source ChatGPT to see if people have insurance. It's crazy. No, it's not going to work. So let's train and get some education on it, right? Next with it is, let's have some guardrails with that AUP, and most importantly, let's have some true defined business use cases, right? So that we can tell everybody, this is how you use it. Let's focus on that. It's just not the Wild West anymore, because all it's going to do is get us into trouble. And also, by establishing those guardrails, we also talked about perhaps establishing some sort of sandbox, potentially, where, yes, you have a controlled one internally where you can use company data, but then on the outside, have it open with just maybe de-identified data, or better yet, just public data. So that was another one. One thing that we really wanted to make sure and ensure by doing these guardrails is to make sure that shadow IT doesn't happen. I work with startups. I see it all the time. Hey, we're engineers. You can put these guardrails in place, but we're going to get around it anyway. That's great, guys. Well, we're going to make it so that at least we can give you the capability and use it within the confines of the rules and guardrails that we defined. Next, AI is no different than anything related to data, as we've been speaking about. And with that, the data governance rules apply. So, right, that goes into the AUP, and that goes into your governance program. It is a great tool, but we just make sure that has to come into that whole data governance structure that you have at your company. Lastly, establish potentially some local models that bring in that type of data that you want specifically there. So that way, because we all know what the open source stuff leads, it leads to bias. We saw it with Google and we saw it with Microsoft. How do we make it so that what it's producing is giving us the results that we expect without that bias? From there, we jumped into the SEC ruling, right? So the two aspects of the SEC ruling, right? One is the aspect that every public company has to follow a 10K, right? That's the annual 10K. And the second one around the material event in the event of a breach, right? So we all know that material can mean anything. It depends on the company. So it's up to us to define it properly. And then with that, you have 4 days in where you have to report, right? So one gentleman at our table at the organization that he belongs to, that I used to work for, it's not 4 days, it's 4 hours, right? So either way, we need to be sure that we have the right information and the right governance processes in place to be able to at least report and have that report be effective back to the SEC, but at the same time not be too specific and not be too vague, right? Because then that's a dance that we all play in cybersecurity anyway, so we should be used to that. Let's see. Next, when it comes to defining a breach and material, figure out the communication, right? Some of the startups I work at, right, you have to be able to show them and tell them, how do you communicate this properly, right? You might not be able to just to say, let's start sending emails out that we have a breach. Is it really? It's probably an incident, so let's be careful how we say things, because that can lead to downstream implications. Lastly, which I think is really important, is how to revise your incident response policy in light of AI, right? It's not the same thing anymore. So with that, we talked about definitely revisiting it no matter what type of AI that you're using to ensure that in the event of an incident, you're covered and you know exactly what to do. So, thank you very much.